This is Charlotte Talks. I'm Mike Collins on the Local News Roundup. It's taxation without representation in North Carolina's 9th Congressional District as the seat goes unfilled at the start of the new Congress. We have the latest. One thing we know, Robert Pittenger won't run for that seat. Neither will former Governor Pat McCrory, but that doesn't mean he won't hang up his radio headphones for another political opportunity. Last year, Mayor Lyles successfully persuaded voters to say yes to a $50 million affordable housing bond, but she still sees work ahead on that front in the new year. And the new year begins with 2 homicides in Charlotte on New Year's Day. Our roundtable of reporters is set to talk about those stories and others, and those reporters include Alex Olgin from WFAE News. Good morning.
Good morning.
Erik Spanberg is back, senior staff writer for the Charlotte Business Journal. Hello to you.
Hello, Mike.
Glenn Burkins is here. He's the editor and publisher of QCityMetro.com.
Good morning.
Good morning. And Nick Ochsner joins us from WBTV News. Welcome.
All the way in from Bladen County, just for you, Mike.
We're all on the radio. If that's not enough, you can watch us this morning on Facebook Live. And now, the continuing saga, All My Children Have One Life to Live, as the world turns to the edge of night in North Carolina's 9th Congressional District. Well, you got to admit, this kind of sounds like a soap opera, right?
That was unexpected.
Yes, it was. As we all recall, Republican Mark Harris defeated Republican incumbent Robert Pittenger in the primary and defeated Democrat Dan McCready by some 900 votes in the general election, only to have the State Board of Elections refuse to certify the results because of possible election fraud. Are you all keeping up?
No. I'm with you.
Okay, state Republicans were practically falling all over themselves last month in condemning these alleged activities and calling for a new election. But now, Mark Harris says he'll go to court to ask them to certify his election immediately.
We had no other choice based on what has transpired here at the State Board of Elections over the course of the last week. And so we kind of find ourselves with in no man's land, if you will, and we have asked the court to step in.
What happened with the State Board of Elections is that they are no more. They had called for a hearing on January 11th. Last week, a 3-judge panel dissolved the board, and a new board won't be in place until January 31st. But wait, it gets even more entangled.
Bring back the music, Mike. Bring back the music.
Oh, let's bring back the music.
Yeah.
Okay. Democratic Governor Roy Cooper sought to appoint a temporary bipartisan board, but Republicans have refused to appoint any members from their party to be on that board. All this, even as the probe into fraud allegations continues, and even as congressional Democrats, led by Maryland's Steny Hoyer, have said they will not seat Harris until the election is certified. Can this get any worse? Why did the 3-judge panel dissolve the old Board of Elections?
If you can believe it, the scathing opinion that came down kind of unexpectedly and late Thursday night, the day before this was supposed to take effect, said essentially they were dissolving the board because the board hadn't acted as quickly as they said they would, and people deserve an answer and deserve a person in that seat. As a result of that ruling, written by Judge Caldwell, he's on the panel. It appears to have been written by Judge Caldwell. We don't know for sure. Who's the senior resident Superior Court judge in Gaston County. In issuing that ruling, we've now delayed this for an untold number of weeks.
Is this an unanticipated, unintended consequence, or did he just not think this through?
Or maybe he made a point. I don't know if it was the point he wanted to or not. But.
So Nick, there are 1,000 strands to this, but one that struck me in the past week is the fact that you have Robin Hayes, the GOP chair, and other Republican operatives who have said, I think members of the legislature also have said, we're not going to be part of a temporary board. This would be unconstitutional in essence. But aren't we talking about a board structure that was created by the Republican-led legislature and only undone because Governor Cooper was fighting it in court? Am I tracing that correctly?
Yeah, and all right, buckle in because it's going to get complicated,
I know
right? So the Cooper wanted to appoint a temporary board under the law that was in effect before the new law that was declared unconstitutional, so the law that was in place in 2016. And I think really what Republicans were challenging was Cooper, when he said he was going to announce this temporary board, said he was going to make the appointments from the current Republicans and current Democrats that were sitting on the 9-member board. And that's really what the Republicans, in fact, in the last letter that was sent this past Sunday from the GOP's attorney to the governor's office, they kind of recognized an inherent authority to appoint a temporary board, but then said, but nanny, boo-boo, you can't do it unless we give you names, and we're not going to give you names.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Why? Why won't they give them names?
I think they
Don't want the board
question.
appointed, right?
Well, I don't know that. I really can't figure out the end game here, other than they believe that the board shouldn't exist until it goes in. So the new one takes effect by law. Now, the other interesting thing is the 3-judge panel order dissolving the previous board came down at minutes before 5 or right at 5 o'clock on the 27th. That is hours after the General Assembly adjourned sine die for the year. Had they done it at 9 o'clock that morning, the General Assembly could have scrambled and changed the date on its bill that it had just overridden.
The other possibility is that the Republicans believe they have a better case and chance in court than they might have with this temporary board.
Well, Governor Cooper has said that the Republicans' refusal to appoint members to this temporary board, quote, could obstruct an ongoing investigation into disturbing allegations of election fraud and prevent a duly appointed constitutional board of elections from being able to hear evidence and make an informed decision. Is he right about this? Is this obstruction of something?
Their refusal to provide names for Cooper to nominate, which is required by law for the governor to, the governor gets to make the appointments from people the party chooses, has absolutely delayed the process because there was supposed to be a hearing next Friday that was supposed to take place to hear the public evidentiary hearing, and so that can't take place because there's not a board, and so.
And we won't have a board till January 31st now, correct?
That's right.
But the investigation is continuing. Is that right? I mean,
Yes.
it may be, the outcome may be delayed, but the investigation and what has been collected so far is not going to be tossed.
And so the public posturing here, or the public line, and I guess has pretty good reason, is that it's not that a board doesn't exist, it's that a 5-member board exists under the 2016 law with no members.
So, if I recall correctly in reading this over the holidays, and maybe I'm wrong, so correct me if I am, because you
Had too much eggnog when you read it?
Yeah, a little bit. But anyway, this temporary board would have been comprised of 3 Democrats, because the governor's a Democrat, and 2 Republicans appointed by the legislature.
Appointed by the governor.
Oh, okay, well,
From names given to him from the
by
Republican Party,
Okay,
from the party.
but even without Republicans, 3 is a quorum. The board could meet. Why aren't they?
Well, the governor said he didn't want to do that because that would stir up yet another round of fighting and controversy.
Yeah, talk about a one-sided partisan thing. I mean, even if it was by the Republicans making, I think the governor was wise to say, you know what, we'll just wait. He said also in his release announcing that he wouldn't appoint this temporary board, I don't remember what day that was, Wednesday?
I think that's right.
That his intention was to have appointed the same 5 members that he was going to appoint in January as well.
Robin Hayes, the chairman of the state Republican Party, said that the Republicans' unwillingness to participate stemmed from their opinion that such a temporary board would be unlawful. In what way?
I mean, they said that, but I'm not sure. So they said a temporary board would be unlawful, but in other communication from the state GOP, they've acknowledged the governor has the authority to appoint a board from the names that they provide. So again, I think it gets back to if you're going to appoint a board and we didn't give you names, then you can't do that.
Meanwhile, let's get back to Mark Harris, because of the dissolution of the Elections Board and the corresponding delay of a new board being able to reach a decision on what to do next, Mark Harris has gone to the courts asking them to certify his election, but given that the Democratic-controlled Congress has said it will not seat him, why bother? Would Congress recognize a court certification over a Board of Elections?
Well, I don't think this isn't a court certification. And here's an important thing to note. We didn't have a state board of elections for pretty much all of 2017. And in that time, that precedent was kind of set for the Wake County courts and the Court of Appeals, I believe it was, to act in that quasi-judicial function of the state board of elections and perform the administrative tasks that the state board normally would have. And so because at some point, the staff at the state board of elections needs someone with some authority to order them to do a thing from time to time, certify elections, hear protests, what have you, or things like this. So what Mark Harris is doing is asking a judge to come in and order staff at the State Board of Elections to perform a function just as the State Board of Elections would order as well.
What's the likelihood of that happening? Do you know?
It is tough. So this was just filed yesterday morning. The any other interested party has until Monday the 14th to submit their briefs. I will be really interested to see how the State Board of Elections responds. I'm sure whether or not they'll ultimately have standing, I'm sure the McCready campaign will want to be heard on this and others, and so no doubt people will object and say the court can't do this. I've seen, well-reasoned people, former Supreme Court Justice Bob Orr on Twitter say, who is the court going to order to certify this? But again, I think it is instructive that we have a precedent where the state board staff had looked to the courts before. So if I'm Mark Harris, I certainly think that's what I'm going to do.
So if the courts were to certify Mark Harris's election, could that certification be then overturned by the new Board of Elections, who would then come into possession of all the information that has been collected in this investigation and maybe find some malfeasance and overturn it?
I don't believe.
We don't know a lot of this stuff. I'm just asking questions.
Well, no, let's think.
Good question.
Yeah, let's think through that for a second, right? Because no more than any board can overturn the certification of any other election promulgated by a previous board before it.
Okay.
Well, the only thing I would add there, though, is that if there is a new general election, they've mandated that there be a new primary, and that election was certified.
True. Well, that's an interesting point, but that was done through operation of law because the General Assembly passed a new bill that mandated such a thing. It wasn't just the board's inherent authority to override itself.
So Mark Harris's campaign issued a statement saying that the board, quote, has not disclosed any information to suggest that the votes in question in the board staff's investigation are sufficient in number to change the outcome of the 9th Congressional District election. Really?
But
has
that's
the state
not,
board said anything about this except for the fact that
they haven't, but also that's not the stipulation that could lead to a new election. It's not simply the number of votes.
Well, there are two different standards here. There's the substantial impact on the election, and then there's the taint. So,
yes.
and the without taint of fraud or impropriety basically is the standard that has continued to be referenced here. And one is the taint standard is a lower threshold to reach than the substantial impact on the election. And so the board has said essentially, and I think if they were ever to order a new election, it wouldn't be because we found 906 votes that would make Dan McCready the winner. It's because we would say, we found so much funny business going on down here. We don't know what should have actually happened. Let's do it again.
So David Freeman, who is Mark Harris's attorney, has also said that Harris won the popular vote and should be certified. You can hold up the Democrat. You can't hold up the democratic process like that, he said. Well, last month, the chairman of the party, Robin Harris, and the state executive director, Dallas Woodhouse, were falling all over themselves, calling for new elections. Is that still the case?
Well, no, they went back and changed their minds after that, though.
Did they really?
Yes, they did. And they had said it was...
Don't take a day off in this job.
It was on the contingency, right, Nick? It was on the contingency that if the early voting results had been leaked, there should be another election. And then later they said, this needs to be certified. He needs to be seated. Let's go on down the road.
And that came after Harris told me, quote, he didn't feel the circling of wagons around Harris like the Democrats had around McCready, is when the change in posture came.
Hokey smokes.
It's all very clear, Mike.
Yeah. And we're not through yet with talking about the 9th Congressional District. There's so much more to talk about with regard to that, and we will cover it all and more and move on to other things. It's the Local News Roundup on Charlotte Talks. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE members and Corkscrew Wine Shop and Bar, located at The View near BB&T Ballpark in Uptown Charlotte and at Birkdale Village in Lake Norman, offering wine and beer from all over the world. Relax, uncork, unwind, thescrewcrew.com. And Blumenthal Performing Arts presenting Matthew Bourne's Cinderella, a reimagined wartime romance set during the London Blitz, January 6th through 12th at Belk Theater. Tickets at 704-372-1000. New Mecklenburg County Sheriff Gary McFadden, who lost no time in making changes to the department, will be our guest on this program on Monday. As his first act, he ended participation in the federal 287G program, prompting a warning from Immigration and Customs Enforcement about that leading to a crackdown. And he also, at least for a while, has reinstituted in-person visits with detainees. What's next? We'll ask him Monday on this program at 9.
No money, no wall, and still no deal.
Congress convenes, welcoming a lot of newcomers. The president praises PBS and enjoys the big picture.
I had a meeting at the Pentagon with lots of generals. They were like from a movie. Better looking than Tom Cruise and stronger.
The Friday News Roundup next time on 1A.
The roundup of the week's news continues with 1A right after Charlotte Talks at 10 here on listener-funded 90.7 WFAE.
It's Charlotte Talks on listener-funded 90.7 WFAE and 90.3 WFHE. I'm Mike Collins. It's the Local News Roundup. Our roundtable of reporters has gathered once again to explain the 9th Congressional District conundrum. Most of that's being explained by Nick Ochsner, who spends his vacations in Bladen County.
Boy, do I know how to party.
Yeah. He's with WBTV. Glenn Burkins is here with QCityMetro.com. Erik Spanberg from the Charlotte Business Journal. And Alex Olgin from WFAE News. At the center of this fraud investigation is a man we've talked about before, McCrory Dowless. That's Dowless, not Dallas, but Dowless. He was hired by a political consulting firm working for the Harris campaign to help with voter turnout in Bladen County.
We now really know he was hired by Mark Harris, but paid by that firm.
Okay. Now, the former incumbent, Republican Robert Pittenger, has turned down, he did turn down an opportunity to have Mr. Dowless work for his campaign.
He was not, selective. I mean, he didn't just align himself to the Republican Party. He worked for both sides. It didn't matter. He was a political prostitute.
Is it unusual for people who contract with political campaigns to work with politicians on both sides of the aisle?
There's increasingly more of that in North Carolina, but I think it is not unfair to say that McCrory Dowless went to work for people. One, it's definitely a fact that he worked for both parties, but two, most likely went to where his business was going to be that year in that election.
So Pittenger called him a political prostitute. Is that why Pittenger decided not to hire him, or were there other reasons for his not hiring McCrory Dowless?
Generally speaking, Pittenger said he met with McCrory Dowless before the 2018 election, and he decided not to hire him because he didn't feel comfortable with what he was doing. What he was doing being, generally speaking, a concentrated effort to promote and the requesting of and voting through absentee ballots.
Pittenger's been pretty quiet about all of this, except
until this week.
Well, yeah, until this week, and when media outlets have gone to him, including WFAE, the margin of victory for Mark Harris over Pittenger in the primary, I think, was 828 votes. Unofficially, Mark Harris allegedly beat Democrat Dan McCready by about 905 votes, a very similar vote total. Still, Pittenger told WFAE's Lisa Wharf he didn't feel the need to go public with his concerns about McCrory Dowless.
Nobody likes a whiny sore loser and starts blaming somebody else, and that's usually the perception out there when you start claiming fraud. So the best thing to do is get the right folks who have the authority to make that determination, and I'm glad they finally started looking into it. I think this has been going on for probably a decade out there.
Yes, it's been going on for a long time. It's never been prosecuted. Prosecutors have been alerted to it. I'm going to come back to the question I've asked 5 times before. Why?
And that kind of shoots the hole in what Pittenger just said. I respect him in terms of what he said about the sore loser, but the fact is, this had been known a long time. He was a federal lawmaker. Why had he not brought this to the attention of authorities before then in a meaningful way?
Well, also, Glenn, I've just been perplexed through this whole thing about. I go back to the primary. Okay, I understand we're talking about the general election, but 828 votes. Here's a 3-term congressman who is running for re-election. He loses by 828 votes. He's telling us over and over again that this is known, that it was pay to play, political prostitute. And he just kind of shrugs his shoulders. And then on top of that, you have Robin Hayes and Dallas Woodhouse and others in the party who I can only surmise ignored whatever it was that Robert Pittenger said to them after the primary, or they just
or at least didn't take it seriously.
Or didn't take it seriously. I mean, it's so much more than just the general election that needs to be excavated here.
Yes. Here's the other thing. We know... So we get back to why has this never been prosecuted? So in 2016, oddly enough, McCrory Dowless filed a complaint about a different group called the Bladen County Improvement Association PAC doing ballot operations that may or may not have been legal itself. And in the course of investigating that complaint, the board started asking Dowless about the things he did. And then when he stopped talking, they kind of stopped publicly investigating. But the board then voted to certify those races, but then said, hey, we should take what we have found and send it to prosecutors. Well, it was referred to the feds. The feds haven't done anything with it and still haven't done anything with it. Through a roundabout circuitous process that is a great episode of your soap opera, Mike, the Wake County District Attorney ended up taking state jurisdiction of this investigation. And of the 2016 things, this January of 2018. And so she says that investigation has continued all year. She said they got new reports of complaints and information after the primary and more information after the general election. But still, we know that complaints were filed with the state board in 2010. We know there was a pretty heated thing that involved lawyers in 2014 and a state representative down there named William Brisson involving these same kind of allegations. A complaint was made for better or worse in 2016. And so here we are at 2018, and finally we've decided to blow this up.
So let me bring up another name that we heard about when this investigation first broke, and that is Joshua McMalcolm. He is a Democratic lawyer from Robeson County. Is it Robeson or Robeson? Robeson County, who said at the time, I'm very familiar with unfortunate activities that have been happening down in my part of the state, and I'm not going to turn a blind eye to what took place to the best of my understanding, which has been going on for a number of years, and that's when they refused to certify the election. You reported this week, Nick, that Joshua Malcolm was in frequent communication with a guy named Jens Lutz, a Bladen County Democrat. Who is Jens Lutz?
So he is a Bladen County Democrat. In 2014, he operated a political consulting business and a political action committee with McCrory Dallas, back when Dallas was mostly working for Democrats in Bladen County. He most recently served as the vice chairman of the Bladen County Board of Elections until his sudden resignation in early December, just days after he interviewed with investigators from the State Board of Elections. And so we know that based on public records that we were able to wrangle out of from Josh Malcolm, we know that the two were in communication about things, including some concerns involving elections in Bladen County in 2018.
So why is that problematic that they were in contact?
No one has said that it's problematic. It's certainly newsworthy and interesting. One, it's never been disclosed. Two, and I think more importantly, we don't know what they were talking about. We have some indication from their text messages that generally speaking the topics, but we don't know what was said.
Well, is this why Joshua Malcolm said he knows about unfortunate activities because of his conversations with Jens Lutz, who used to work with McCrory Dallas? This is a soap opera.
I don't think the entirety of his knowledge is based exclusively on what Jens Lutz told him. But I would think it is equally as interesting if we found out that Joshua Malcolm was talking with McCrory Dallas or with anyone with the Bladen Improvement Association PAC or anybody else. But I think there are questions in my mind, and I'm not a lawyer or an ethicist, but there are questions in my mind about whether or not that should have been disclosed, the fact that he'd had these conversations before he made the motion to not certify a seat for U.S. Congress. They were not disclosed. And we know that at the start of each state board meeting, they ask, does any member here have any conflict of interest? Any appearance of a conflict of interest? If so, declare it now, and let's talk about it. Malcolm didn't make such a declaration. When he made the original motion that led to the 9th District not being certified, he just gave this general vague, I'm aware of activity, unfortunate events. He didn't say, I've been talking to people, including county board members. Now, the state board says, of course he was talking to Jens Lutz. It's not unusual for the state board to talk to county boards. But a couple things. One, it took us weeks to get Malcolm to produce the records he did, and kept providing more. But secondly, what I do think is the most interesting is the fact that Malcolm was making phone calls to Lutz on November 3rd, 5th, and 6th, election day, and calls that he didn't disclose to me until a day after he said he'd produced all of his phone records. And then he said, oh, by the way, here are 4 more calls, 3 of which he made to Lutz. So it wasn't just Lutz calling him for questions and concerns. It was also Malcolm calling him for what we don't know because Malcolm won't tell me.
So, to recap.
By the way, Mike, this should all be tidied up by November. So
Okay. Well, actually, we don't know when it's going to.
Well, no, but I'm just guessing.
This could go till November.
It could go till November.
Yeah.
And the most important thing from this entire conversation, Mike, is that by the time we are settled with this election, you personally will miss HB2. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay. And by the time I get to Phoenix, I'll be sleeping. So we don't know exactly when the details of the old Board of Elections investigation will be released. We don't know if or when Mark Harris will be certified the winner or exactly when a new election might be held. We do know, for whatever reason, that Robert Pittenger will not run again in the 9th District. And we also know that former Governor Pat McCrory has no interest in running, but he may be considering another run at the governor's office or at replacing Senator Richard Burr, who has already said he will not run for re-election. And we know this because McCrory talked about it on his radio show. He has a radio show? Who knew?
If not me, then who is the most qualified to either be governor or U.S. senator when those jobs open up? And I've got to ask the question, who best would be able to serve in those jobs, me or someone else? And I'm going to be going through that evaluation. I'm going to take my time.
Mm-hmm. Since Elizabeth Warren has already thrown her hat into the presidential contest ring, isn't it time for McCrory to make some sort of a decision?
I was going to say, I don't think he's running for president. I think we can establish that maybe.
But the time is nigh, isn't it?
The time is
an announcement.
I do think it's...
And he has a platform.
It's going to be interesting politically, though, when you talk about 2020 governor or 2022 Senate, because obviously Dan Forrest on the Republican side is already out there very clearly running. So I'm curious which way he's going to go. He's going to run for something. I think that's certain.
Senate.
Well, that's the most interesting thing to me is that he made it very well known that he was still thinking about running for his old job as governor. I think the inclusion of, maybe I'll think about the Senate is an interesting development.
Yes.
Okay. In November, Democrats filed a suit in Wake County Superior Court challenging the way the states or the state legislative districts have been drawn, arguing that they excessively favor Republicans to the point of violating the state constitution. Meanwhile, Republicans sought to move the suit to federal court. But on Wednesday, a federal judge said, no, the case has to stay in state court. Why the ruling, and why did Republicans want to move it?
Well, one of the interesting things was that the judge said she will explain her reasoning later. So as far as I know, we don't have the reason yet. But I think the Republican suspicion, right, is that the Democrats want it to be handled by the state because the state Supreme Court is 5-2 in favor of registered Democrats. So, I think that's a pretty clear partisan battle, and that's why the two sides have taken the sides they've taken.
Wow.
Yep.
So the Civil War is underway. We just haven't recognized it officially.
Something to that effect.
Okay, let's move to local stuff. Last November, well, not that the 9th District isn't local, mind you, but last November, Charlotte voters said yes to a $50 million bond for affordable housing, a victory for Mayor Vi Lyles, who advocated and pushed very hard for it. She says that money and the additional bonds floated for workforce development were just the beginning. The real work begins this year.
I expect in early 2019 that we will actually have a metric that you'll be able to hold us accountable for when we start talking about what types of housing can we build and where we will locate.
So how will that metric be developed and by what entity?
Well, that's going to come from the city staff and the city council. They're going to have to figure out how they're going to judge the success of this. And one of the things that's interesting about this, Mike, is so you're talking about $50 million, which is tripling the housing bonds. And then you're talking about a matching $50 million from the private community that's been, I think, 20% raised, something like that. And what you hear over and over from everyone at the city is we're not just going to take $50 million and plunk it into affordable housing in the traditional ways. We want to leverage it and get more bang for our buck, both through the private sector, through some other ways of financing things. And so what does all that mean? The mayor's right. All the work comes now. I think the easy part was getting that vote, but how do they measure it and how do they actually get a lot more mileage out of this? They haven't figured that out yet.
She's also said that in 2019 she wants to become more accessible with an open door policy so that she can meet and learn from people, citizens, voters. The mayor's pretty busy as it is. Did she say how she might achieve that?
I don't think the mayor said that, although I guess you could invite people in when she visits with you. What is it? How many Thursdays a
Next
month?
Thursday
Yeah,
she
yeah.
will be
so,
here with us, yes.
So maybe we could have a little a town hall party or something. No, I don't know how they're going. She's
We'll
going
just
to
throw
do
open.
that.
We'll throw open the studio
That's right.
doors.
Everybody.
Bring your own cocktails. But she'll be here next Thursday. Well, I'll ask her these questions.
That's what this program needs, cocktail hour.
Yeah. Lyles also wants those electric scooters to stay. That's interesting to me that she wants them to stay. I don't think she's ever ridden one. But the city council is planning to vote this month to set new regulations for them. Now, I thought the city was waiting on the state to decide how we should treat scooters because they don't want to be they don't want to implement regulations only to have them overturned by the state.
Mike, what did you say earlier, though? You can't take a day off, see?
That's why the change in approach?
Why not?
What an answer that is. Why not? 3 on your side says, why not?
Isn't that how most things seem to be made in North Carolina
Yes.
these days?
I think that this is, I think Nick is probably right. Why not? And I also think it's getting so much attention. They feel compelled to do something. And it looks like the Roadrunner, Wile E. Coyote situation, because as soon as they put something together and approve it, the legislature will.
Well,
And the state has not done anything to
right.
implement
I
it.
would point to the length of time. Maybe they thought they would be taken up in the short session by the General Assembly. It was not. I would think that this is an issue for the long session, which is in the odd number of years that we're going into, when the General Assembly takes up kind of more weighty,
Scooter regulation is an urban issue, and the General Assembly
Rural.
Yeah.
or rural.
And-
Exactly.
I mean, you wonder too, just because there are regulations on the books, are they going to be enforced, and are people going to follow them or care if the penalties aren't high enough?
Right.
The big thing here is what they will charge the scooter companies, because that was something that they weren't being charged, and now it sounds like the city is much more interested in having a little revenue from the scooter companies.
Okay.
Maybe this could build the new football
Do
stadium.
we have any idea what these rules might look like? These regulations might look like?
Bird Scooter Stadium.
Yes, I like it.
Has anybody on city council said anything about how they see these rules being written?
I have not heard any clear consensus. I think the council members are in various places. I think Braxton Winston, I think, has been a little bit leery of over-regulating the scooters. Then you've had others who have said, this is a very dangerous situation. So that's a long way of saying I don't think we know.
Okay, the federal government shutdown continues. It doesn't really involve many people in Charlotte, although it does involve some. I think 800,000 or so federal workers have been furloughed, and both sides in this conflict are completely at loggerheads. And it's all over, as we all know, the president's border wall, the one he promised Mexico would pay for. And South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, one of the president's biggest supporters, says Trump should stick to his guns in the fight over funding for the wall, or it would be the end of his presidency. He also told Sean Hannity on Fox News that, quote, the president is going to challenge the Democrats to compromise, and if they continue to say no, they are going to pay the price with the American people. Has Senator Graham seen the videotape of the president with Schumer and Pelosi in the Oval Office saying, "I'll take the blame"?
That never happened. This is a totally new political environment. The president just isn't held accountable for what he said.
Clearly. Hold that thought. We'll come back with more. We have to take a break. It's Charlotte Talks on WFAE. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE members and the law firm of Horak Talley, with more than 185 years of combined experience in family law, whose goal is representing and protecting clients in separation and divorce. Details at horaktalley.com. And Gardner-Webb University, announcing their new 10-month online Master's in Business Administration degree, now accepting applications at gardner-webb.edu/MBA10. Well, the roundup of this week's news continues in 20 minutes with a look at the nation's biggest stories, including the government shutdown with no end in sight and a standoff about the border wall, a new Congress sworn in yesterday, the 2020 presidential race kicking off into high gear, at least medium, well, maybe low gear, with Elizabeth Warren announcing her candidacy. We have a ways to go on that. Those stories and more beginning at 10 with Joshua Johnson and his panel of journalists during the weekly news roundup national hour in 20 minutes on WFAE. We're coming right back.
2 weeks into the government shutdown, private businesses pick up the tab to keep parts of Yellowstone National Park open.
It should be open, and services should be there because it is the people's park.
They won't get their money back.
There is no reimbursement from the government after the shutdown ends. The funds that we pay operate for those days.
The shutdown and national parks this afternoon on All Things Considered from NPR News.
All Things Considered from 4 to 6:30 on 90.7 WFAE, Charlotte's NPR news source.
It's the Local News Roundup on Charlotte Talks on WFAE and WFHE. I'm Mike Collins. We're here with Alex Olgin from WFAE News, Erik Spanberg from the Charlotte Business Journal, Nick Ochsner, WBTV News, and Glenn Burkins, QCityMetro.com, where he's the editor and the publisher. We were talking about the government shutdown and Lindsey Graham's comments that the Democrats would pay for this pay the price for this if they don't move their stance on the president's wall. Let's get back to Schumer and Pelosi in the Oval Office with the president when he said, "I will take the blame." What happened to that? Where did that go?
Doesn't matter what he says yesterday or last week or last
what happened
hour.
To Mexico
he just changes
will pay
his
for
mind.
The wall?
I don't think they wanted to, although he seems to have a cordial relationship with the new Mexican president. But I think Graham had an audience of one when he went on the president's favorite news channel to talk directly to the president and seemingly encourage him to stick to his guns.
So Lindsey Graham went on Sean Hannity and said, if the Democrats don't move on this, they will pay the price. But polls show that most Americans don't favor the wall. Is he hallucinating, or once again, is he simply talking directly to the president?
Yeah. Well, he's talking directly to the president, and the president's talking to his base. I mean, I think, I don't think any of this is unknown to them. I think this is a clear political strategy.
But I can't imagine why the Republican leadership would want to prolong the government shutdown over this. This is, in my opinion, this is a no-win situation for the Republicans far more than the Democrats.
Plus, we're talking about, we're far away from Washington. I grew up there. It's a government town. That's what it's all about. And that's a lot of people being out of work just in one city. And it begins to snowball very quickly when you can't pay your bills.
There was just it affects all different facets.
And tourism is down because you can't go
right.
anywhere.
Museums.
Museums are closing. And
IRS, number of agencies.
They can close.
And we heard that the Indian Health Service doesn't have money, so people on reservations are going to have trouble getting health care soon.
It's interesting. This seems like one of the government shutdowns that will resonate with the public. We had two others last year that really kind of went by with a blip. But this one, I think, is, 13, 14 days in? I think this is going to go long enough. 16, I'm sorry. I can't.
I think currently, today is the third longest, according to the chart in the Axios newsletter I saw this morning.
I don't recall the government. I'm old. I don't recall the government shutting down when I was a kid, ever.
Yeah, I don't know.
It did once.
During Clinton's years, right?
Well, I think it
I wasn't a kid during Clinton's
I think
years.
it may have even before
Let's go back
then.
to Eisenhower and Kennedy and Johnson.
It seems like it became a political thing that resonated with the Gingrich-Clinton year.
With Gingrich-Clinton.
And then we've had some that have made a difference in terms of political fortune since then, and some, as I say, that just kind of went by and they were done in a couple of days and nobody really paid attention. But this one, I think, has some staying power.
According to this chart from Axios I just pulled up, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the 70s. So
right, really? Looky there.
Not nearly as long.
Was there one in the 40s? No, really.
During the war, I doubt it seriously.
Mike, did you cover the war?
No, but I doubt it seriously.
It's not in the chart if there was, but I do think I thought that was interesting today because it feels to me, and I'm all my 29 years here, half of Mr. Collins here. It feels to me like the shutdowns are a new phenomenon, but this just reinforces that.
And if you look at how they ended, usually no one really won.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, let's look at a couple of things that will occupy news here in the short future ahead of us. The Mecklenburg County Tax Assessor's Office is putting finishing touches on the property revaluation that they must, by law, go through every 8 years, and they are predicting residential property is likely to increase by an average of 40% in their valuation, and commercial property 78%. When will we know how that will translate to an actual increase in tax bills?
That's an excellent question, Mike, and I think nothing's happier to start a new year than the prospect of higher property taxes. I think voters love that. The notices will go out this month in terms of how much your property value has gone up, but then you won't know how much more you're paying in taxes until the county commissioners set their budget. So at the end of June, that's when that decision will be made.
But when you had the new folks, the new county commissioners on your show a couple weeks ago, right? I believe they were pretty firm in saying they would like to try to make this tax rate neutral.
Neutral, yeah. But the county's only one component of that. The city also has to do that to make the taxes keep your tax bill where it is, because they have their own tax rate.
Yes, yeah. The county's tax rate is higher than the city's tax rate,
I think so.
I believe. So, yeah. And there are 4 new people. They seem to be somewhat of a coalition just by virtue of not having been there before together. So, I'd be surprised if at least the county decides they want to do anything more than just a small actual increase in its revenue.
So I think it was yesterday, Alex, that you reported on something we haven't heard a lot of talk about in recent years, and that is HIV in Mecklenburg County. And the county is now looking to churches to help stop the spread. Is this something new?
Well, so Gibby Harris, the health director, had brought up to the county commissioners, and the county commissioners had also said they wanted faith involvement. The theory being lots of people go to church or other faith organizations, synagogues, temples, what have you. Maybe we should talk to them there. But they haven't identified how many churches have been involved. I only talked to one pastor, and she was pretty adamant about talking to her congregants about it. But I don't know how widespread this would have to have an impact. The county's been trying to do other things to bring down the number of new HIV infections. It went up a little bit in 2017 from where it was 2016. Now the health director says, yeah, but we're doing more testing, so we expect it to go up. So that's not altogether surprising. But they want to get a lot of people on this prevention medicine, theory being that would stop the spread, or once you are tested, if you know you have it, you can get on treatment to then stop spreading it.
Is that the message from the pews, get on PrEP?
That is, so the pastor I talked to said she has not yet said that from the pulpit, but she has talked to, she says, youth groups about, safe sex and other things ways you could transmit HIV. And she sort of gave this message of acceptance, like, look, we know that it's a problem. If you want to talk to me about it, I can help you get treatment. She also got tested in front of her congregation, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Back in the 80s, it was HIV was an epidemic, and it was spreading like wildfire until they came up with drugs and people changed their behaviors, et cetera. Is it still a problem in Mecklenburg County? Are we having lots of new cases?
Well, we have the highest in the state. We have the highest rate in the state. Glenn, did you?
And it's happening in certain populations of the county more so than others. What I was going to say is that Mecklenburg County has developed a pretty good track record of working with the faith community to address health concerns. There's a program called Village Heartbeat that seeks to reduce the rate of heart disease, diabetes, other chronic diseases in the African American and the Latino community. And they've signed up dozens of churches across the county. And they're starting to see some real impact, so it's not surprising that they would try to involve the faith community in other efforts of health care.
Okay. Something else in the future that we'll be talking about, I'm sure, the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance. That's a new organization that's about to come into being as the 2 other organizations will merge and disappear, the Charlotte Chamber and the Charlotte Regional Partnership, and along with them disappearing, their 2 leaders, Ronnie Bryant and Bob Morgan. Bob Morgan withdrew his name over the holidays to head the new organization. He took his name out of the running. Ronnie Bryant had already decided to retire. Why did Bob Morgan decide to pull out of the race?
We don't know. He has not spoken to media about this. I mean, I think the obvious guess is that he didn't think he had a good shot to ultimately land the job.
They want new blood, younger blood? What do they want?
I suspect that they want, yes, new blood, because you're putting together this new organization. You're trying to signal to everyone that things are going to be done differently. The turf battles are not going to exist. And oh, by the way, they have these ambitious plans that will require more funding, which means they have to get businesses and local governments to buy in. So I think all of those things make them want to have a fresh start when it comes to the CEO.
And do we know how the Charlotte, is it called the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance?
Just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? I'm sorry.
That would be the CRBA,
yes,
as opposed to the CRVA.
Yes. Well, one of the things that's going to be different is that the chamber recruited businesses services to Charlotte. Obviously, specifically, they would deal with a company like Honeywell. Now, city government will take on that role, and it will be a much more regional focus, as the name implies. So that's the big difference. And then, as I say, they're trying to be more aggressive and ambitious in terms of marketing the area and also in public policy, which means lobbying local and state governments. So those would be some of the things to look for.
Something else changed at the turn of the year, and that was your ability to find out what things cost at your local hospital, your neighborhood hospital.
Well, what they charge, but not what you will pay. That's the thing that is still a mystery. Like now you can find out what Atrium or what Novant is charging insurance companies for an x-ray or for heart surgery, but that doesn't mean that's what you're going to pay. It depends what insurance plan you have. So does it really illuminate a lot about what's coming out of your pocket? No, but it is kind of sticker shock. Like I looked up on Atrium's website, an ankle x-ray, they are charging $400+ for. But that doesn't mean you're going to pay $400.
For a picture?
For an ankle x-ray with 3 views.
Buy a camera phone.
The fight over what you're paying for health care is going to be a big and nasty one in the long session of the General Assembly this year, prompted largely by Republican Dale Folwell trying to find out how much the state health plan is paying people, including UNC healthcare system, for healthcare treatment for its members. He has threatened to basically not spend money at the UNC healthcare if he can't find out how much it's cost. And this is going to rear its ugly head in the form of legislation.
You know, there are some medical procedures and equipment that are astronomically expensive because they're new and groundbreaking. X-rays have been around since Marie Curie. So, I mean, just as other technology has fallen in price as it has aged, why haven't X-rays? Why isn't it $1.50?
Because the medical market is not like the normal market that we think of when you buy other things, and it's so obscure because they negotiate with insurance companies, and we don't have a window into that. It depends on how powerful that insurance company and how powerful that hospital is, how many people go there.
I think we want Mike setting the rates. He's really
$1.50. I'd go for that.
The doctors and nurses might not like this, but patients will be very happy.
You know, we spent a lot of time last year pondering the troubling number of homicides that occurred last year and the year before that, as a matter of fact, in Charlotte. And we don't have to wait to continue that pondering because on the very first day of the year, 2 people were killed in Charlotte. What do we know about these 2 incidents? Are they at all related, or are they completely separate?
I don't think they were related, and I think there's been at least one arrest relating to one. One person was shot while sitting in a car. Another person was shot in front of a home. Coincidentally, there was a homicide just this morning. Someone was found dead in East Charlotte. So I think the number so far is 3.
So that's 3 in the first 4 days of the year.
Was it 57 in 2018?
Something like that.
And it was down from, I want to say, 80 plus in 2017.
Yeah, the number was definitely down.
Yeah.
Speaking of, I'm assuming that those murders were committed with firearms.
Yes.
Speaking of firearms, a lot of people may have forgotten this, but a while back, former Trump campaign worker Vincent Bordini sued the North Carolina campaign director, Earl Phillip, for assault with a 45 caliber handgun. For whatever reason, Bordini dropped his lawsuit last year, but now the state appeals court says the 2016 Trump campaign organization is not responsible, and therefore Bordini cannot revive his lawsuit. The court said that Earl Phillip, who denied this ever happened, was working as an independent contractor with minimal direction from the higher Trump campaign, so they cannot be held responsible. This may be a stretch, but are there ramifications for the Harris campaign and its connection to McCrae Dowless here? I mean,
I don't see how there would be unless a similar event happened.
Well, no, actually, I don't think it's much of a stretch because that's the same construct through which, even though Harris has said he made the decision to hire Dowless, we know that Dowless was paid and was an employee of the Red Dome Group. And so when we talk about the legal liability or culpability imposed upon principals for their contractors, it's that reasoning from the Court of Appeals there could easily be applied to say, well, Mark Harris, Dowless was operating at arm's length.
Mike, I just want to say real quickly, I want to correct myself. It was 57 in 2018 in terms of homicides, and it was 73 in 2017. So there you go.
You had time to look that up, did you?
I like to be right 1 out of 10 times.
Well, let's end the show on an up note. The Panthers.
Can't wait for those playoff games.
Boy, what a great joke you just had
Thank
there,
you.
Mike.
They broke their losing streak in the final game of the season, soundly beating, of all teams, the New Orleans Saints, with our second and third string quarterback. It's been a disappointing year, right? Rumors by season's end of a coaching change, but Ron Rivera seems confident that won't happen.
I feel very fortunate. I've had an opportunity to visit with him, talk with him about things in terms of our preparation going forward, and we'll continue to do that, and I'll continue to work as we're working towards next season.
I hope he's right, because we want him back on Charlotte Square. Is that confidence well placed? Do you think he would have been gone by now?
Yeah, the Monday after the end of the regular season is when coaches are let go. There were 6 let go on top of the 2 that had been let go earlier in the year. So that's a long way of saying yes. I think he's back.
Let's talk about somebody else then. Cam Newton. His sore shoulder held him back for much of the year, and he did a lot of stuff to try to make that shoulder work for him, and it kind of didn't. But we now have this backup quarterback, Taylor Heineke. He played pretty darn well,
until he got hurt.
And
in one game he played.
Even the undrafted rookie Kyle Allen played well.
Had a great game.
Should Cam be looking over his sore shoulder?
I think the Panthers need to look very closely at his shoulder, make sure that they make a decision in time on surgery rather than waiting too late as they did.
And I don't think he has to look over his shoulder at either of the backups.
Okay.
Big picture, yes.
Okay. Well, we won't talk about the Panthers, I don't think, until next season. You never know.
I'm surprised we've talked about him this year. It's NPR.
Tune in next week for the continuing story of the 9th Congressional District. I want to thank everybody for being here. Alex Olgin from WFAE, Nick Ochsner from WBTV, Glenn Burkins, QCityMetro.com, and Erik Spanberg from the Charlotte Business Journal. Thank you all for the hour.